All right, we're gonna start the presentation for this week's Game Dev Club lesson. So today we're gonna be learning about animations in Unity, and they allow you to show motion um, by setting certain values to certain properties to certain values at certain times. That's kind of the main idea of an animation. And with this presentation, you will see um, exactly how that applies to Unity. So first, just to get our feet wet, we should start by figuring out how do we make an animation. Basically, animations are attached to objects. So basically, what we would do is we would first want to have an object. Say we can have a 2D object like a sprite, or and then we can set the sprite, make the sprite actually visible. We're working in a 2D environment right now because it helps usually if you're doing a 2D game, and also if you want to do like frame by frame animation, that's usually done in 2D. So yep, that's why we're working in 2D. I guess we'll just make a random square player, I guess. Or yeah. So we have a sprite and we attach the player image to the sprite. So now we have an object. Basically, animations are attached to objects. So basically, if you don't have this animation window on the bottom over here, then you can go to Window, and there's this Animation tab, and Animation is Control 6, or at the top of this Animation tab. Basically, it's a window. You can find it in the Windows tab. Okay, so now, to create an animation, click Create. And then name your animation whatever. Player anim. I would prefer to call it. And now we have an animation. Hooray! Well, I'm saying hooray too many times. I should probably stop. But, so basically an animation is an asset that tells Unity how a property of a component should change over time. I think I explained that. And we'll see how that works pretty soon. The first aspect of this is how a property, like, it tells Unity how a property changes over time, right? So first we need to tell the animator what property do we want to change. That basically we do that by clicking Add Property, and then we have to select the sprite we want to animate. If we don't have the sprite with the animation, then we can't do this. Add a property. Pick whichever values you want to change. Say I wanted to move, like make the object shrink or grow. So I would pick transform, and I would look for the scale property. And now the animator has access to the scale property, and it can change it. Now, basically, that's how you add components. But now you want to change them, right? Now, basically, here's where keyframes come into play. Keyframes tell Unity how the property should, what value the property should be at this time. You'll see in a second. So first, to create keyframes, you first pick a time here, like this. You can say halfway through the animation, I guess. Right now, just to clarify, this animation will play at 60 frames per second. I'll show you how to change it soon in this presentation, but not right now for simplicity. Basically, what we do is we click on this bar, and so that it turns blue. And then we set the property, which should be colored blue now, to whatever we want. And notice that it turns red. Now you must double click on this third dark bar, on this bar, the third bar from the top of the animation window, this dark bar with this diamond here. Double click that, and now notice that when you scrub through this, it grows to the size we asked for, and then in this case, since this value such a 1, it shrinks back to the original value. So now you can kind of preview our animation by seeing this, and by clicking play, and that's really the very basics of animation. Pick a property, pick a time, and pick the value for the object to be at that time. And Unity will do all the smoothing for you. It will smooth out the animation such that it reaches this property at that time, and it smooths it back such that it will be at the original, back to its original time. One thing to note is that if you delete this key, or this keyframe, it actually, Unity actually doesn't know where to go, so it'll just loop back to the beginning, and you'll end up with something choppy like this. So what you usually want to do is you want to have the same keyframe at the front as at the back, so that Unity will be able to interpolate back and forth between the original and the action. So that is keyframes. You can also, if you want to, add keyframes using the record option. So let's say we had this. This is what we had before. Once we click this red button, any change we make, we can set the scrubbing tool to whichever time you want to set a value to. Now, instead of having to add a keyframe manually, if we change a value here, notice that a keyframe is added automatically. So now, without even having to double click anywhere, we have an animation. So that's basically the use of record. You do want to be careful, because if you don't undo record, then whatever changes you make to the position of the object will become part of the animation. So basically, if you don't remember anything, just remember to click record and turn off record when you're done animating. Okay, so now I should probably note how you want to delete keyframes. Basically, you delete keyframes with the delete key above the backspace key. It's just like that. That's just in case you didn't happen to know. It's pretty important. I know I've fiddled around with figuring out how to delete the keyframe using the backspace key. That was weird, but now you know. Now, we do know that most animations, most objects, like the player, will have multiple animations, like walking, like running, like standing still. So for that, we will want to create multiple animations for the object. So basically, remember, with your object still selected, in order to create multiple animations for the object, once you have an original animation, you can click this next to samples, or if you don't have samples, next to this these crosshairs, you can click this drop down, and then click create new clip. You can name it whatever you want. Player circle, I guess, because we're gonna make a circling animation. And now you already have another animation that we can change the property, and then we can make the object change in a different way for this animation. For example, I guess we could do this, and then we could probably move it around like that, and then make it, just move it around like this. Okay, and then we have another animation. All right, and then note we can switch back and forth between animations by clicking on this drop down again. So now you have multiple animations for your player character. There's one thing. Now we're gonna get to being able to make. Oh, actually, I should probably show you first. If you actually run play right now, the animation will actually start playing. So that's kind of a cool thing, if you wanted to see. So the next thing on the list is creating frame-by-frame animations. This is kind of a more specific way of animating. Basically, what you do is if you take the property, you add the sprite renderer property. You take a property from sprite renderer. Notice that there's a property called sprite that sets the sprite to something. We change that. And basically what we want to do now is basically pick a bunch, and basically what we do is we actually change the property to a bunch of images. We change images throughout the time that the animation plays. So, in my case, I'm going to show you how to take a single image and split it into multiple images for use in a frame-by-frame animation. For example, we have this. We have this image. It is a single image of a bunch of apples with eyes opening up ominously. And basically what you want to do, first, if you have a single image, you want to change it to multiple. And then you click apply. And then you go to you click apply, and you click the sprite editor, and it brings you to this. There's this drop down called slice. You usually it's fine to leave it at automatic, unless there's certain things that you want to do. And basically what you would do is just click slice, and notice that now boxes have appeared around each of the apples. Well, around each of the images. That's Unity splitting up the image into separate images. Click apply, and now you can click this button to see all of these all the images that Unity has determined. Compared to, say, if we set it to single, it would be one image. So I'll just do it again. Multiple. We can apply this and slice it and apply. Okay, so now that we have all of these images, what we can do is what I like to do is drag out the animation window so that we can see both the project view and the animation view at the same time. What you can actually do is select all of these using a shift click. Like, click one side, shift click the other side, and then drag them in. And that will automatically add all of the keyframes. And basically what it will do, what we can do now is, let's see, what this will do is when we play it, is the animation, a sprite continually switches between sprites. The object continually switches between sprites, and therefore you end up with an animation. Now, we know that this thing is kind of going a little bit too fast. It's having epilepsy, and therefore we will want to figure out how to change the frame rate. Basically, in Unity it's called a sample rate, and you can find it here. It's called sample 60. That's the sample rate. If you don't see this, then you can click this gearbox over here and click show sample rate. If it's checked, it'll show. If not, it will not show. So there's two ways you can set the sample rate. One is by these default sample rates. You can set it to 24 frames per second, and then you'll end up with a slower animation already. However, for me, for certain animations, you might want to set it to 12. Like that. And you can set frame rates using this sample box. And that's how you set the sample rate, and thus the frame rate. Alright, so basically, just to go over what we've done just now, we've showed you how to create an animation. We've showed you how to set the values of an animation to, set the properties of an animation to a value at a certain time by adding keyframes. And then we showed you the specific workflow of a frame-by-frame animation in case you want to work with a very specific kind of animation. So now I want to show you how to allow the player to control the animation. And basically, this requires something called the Animator Component, which is over here. If you don't see the Animator Component, it's in Window, Animation, Animator. And basically, it shows you all of the animations possible for the player in kind of this big field. Basically, some things you need to know. This orange line is basically the default state. Is basically the default animation of the of the object, and you can set that by right-clicking on whichever animation you want and setting that as the layer default state. So basically what this does is when the game starts, Unity has to pick an animation to run, and the layer default state is the one it picks. So if I pick player circle, it'll run the player circle animation, supposedly. Oh yeah, we just deleted the player circle animation. Currently, the player circle animation is basically nothing right now. So right now it's not running anything. However, if we set the layer default state to player anim, then the first thing that the first animation that will be is this blinking apple. So yeah, that's basically that's basically what the animator does. It kind of points to an animation and says, this is the animation that I want that Unity should be playing, and Unity plays that animation. Alright, so now what I want to show you is transitions. Basically, Unity allows you to switch between animations using transitions. So basically, if I wanted to, I could switch between I could go from player anim to player circle after player anim is done running. So what this would look like is, first we would have the apple, and then you saw it kind of transferred through this blue arrow to the player circle animation, which is just a square for some reason on like just a square in space. So that's kind of what transition does. Let's actually spice up this square animation a little more. And that should do. So yeah, basically what a transition does is it goes from the one animation to another. Now, what we sometimes want to do is actually transition from one animation to another under a certain condition. Say, like, I have a walking player, right? And I want him to stop playing the walk animation so that he's, like, standing still. And that's where you want a conditional animation. And where you want a conditional transition. And how we do that is by going to the animator, clicking on the transition we want to make conditional, and adding a parameter to it that must be satisfied in order for the transition to take place. The conditions are determined by these parameters are determined. You can add parameters by using this plus sign over here. I'm going to add a bool called isCircling, and basically, when isCircling is true, it'll transition from the player anim to the player circle. I could also say we could also say that isCircling will be false, then it'll transition back to the original blinking apple animation. I should probably note before I forget that if you make a transition to the exit, basically what it does is it just returns back to this green entry square, and it goes back to the default state. So just in case you wanted to know that. But now we set these conditions for the transitions, right? Now what we want to do is actually use a script to modify these transitions. So what we can do is, let's see, go to project and create a new script called change anim. And give it a second to load. And basically what we want to do, well, first we should probably attach the change anim script to the sprite. So we can just drag that to this add component section, or if you want, you can type in change anim, and that'll work too. And you would go here, and in the update function, because we always want to check, we want to keep checking for a certain condition, right? So we want to check, basically we could create a bool. So we wanted to check if the player was holding down the space key. Bool is holding space equals input. You remember from the inputs lesson that we can use the get key function to determine if a player is holding down a key. And then we can use key code.space because we want to check the space. Okay, so now we have a boolean that will be true if we hold down space. Now, what do we do with that in order to change the animation? Basically, what we want to do is actually access the animator component first. So I would create an animator anim variable, and then set anim to get component animator. If you're wondering why I'm using get component, it's because of this. If you click on new sprite, or the sprite that you were animating, you can see that the animator is actually a component. This thing, this weird space, is actually a component that tells the objects how to what animation should be playing. So that's why we can access the animator component using get component. Then we do anim.set bool. In this case, set bool, and there's one of two options. We're gonna go with the simple option and type in the name of the parameter, and we see the parameter's name is circling. I should try and make it a little more visible. Is circling, right? So what we can do is we can set the is circling boolean by typing in the name in the first parameter and then setting it to whatever value we want. In this case, we want to set it to if we want it to be true when this player is holding space. So we do anim.setBool is cooling is holding space, and that will work. If you want to see, and basically what it does is this. When we run it, right now it's just an apple on the screen. I should probably make the apple larger, actually. Let's scale up the size of the apple. Let's make it 5 and 5. So we have a ginormous square. So we have an apple here. Now when I hold space, crap. Let's see. Oh, that's true. Oh my gosh, that is actually pretty sad. Is circling is not is cooling. So it has to be the exact name of the parameter. How did this happen? But yeah, if you mistype something, if you miss a capital letter, then weird stuff might happen. So now let's see if this works. Is circling and is circling, right? So when we hold space, what is this? Have we attached the sprite yet? We have attached it to new sprite, and this is change anim. Oh yeah, well, you have to save, obviously. What is this? Okay, so now let's see what happens. See that? When I hold space, this check mark appears, and it transitions at the next chance it gets to this player circle animation. And when you lift space, is circling is set to false, and we know that it wants to transition back to the original player anim when is circling is false. So that's how transitions work, and you can in player movement, you could say that if the left key is pressed, run the walk animation, and if you release the the walking key, then return to an idle animation. Or if you're in the air, press you run the falling animation. And that's kind of the power of transitions and the animator, because it allows you to give responsiveness to your player character or whatever things that the player character is interacting with. Maybe like a mushroom will kind of squish up and down when the player jumps on it. And that is why animation is really important. It's how you convey information. It's a way of conveying information change to the player of your game. So really, I think that is about it. Basically, you learned how to change properties with the animation window and switch between animations using code and the animator. So now you have the power to make some pretty cool animations and make really cool effects in your game. So thank you for coming.